WordPress Accessibility Day 2024, Unlocking Digital Access, Insights from a Community-Driven Survey, with speakers Norbert Rum, Senior Accessibility Specialist at American Eagle, and Nick Goodrum, Director of Accessibility at American Eagle. This presentation was recorded October 2024.
Welcome to WordPress Accessibility Day 2024. My name is Jessica Sands of Yolantis Website Mentor. Thanks for joining us for Unlocking Digital Access, Insights from a Community-Driven Survey with Nick Goodrum and Norbert Rum. Feel free to add your questions in the Zoom Q&A section as you think of them, and we'll do our best to respond to them at the end of the session. You'll use the chat to connect with other attendees. If you look at your icons on the bottom of your Zoom, if you're attending live, you have a chat, and look at that for maybe messages from your technical support. And you have a Q&A, that's the one with the question mark. That's the one you want to pop your question in if you want your panelists to actually see your question and have us answer it. Let me go ahead and introduce Nick Goodrum first. Nick has been working in the front-end development world for well over a decade and a half. During the journey of improving his code with modern techniques and best practices, he found a deep passion for usability and accessibility. At the full-service digital agency AmericanEagle.com, he grew into the position of Director of Front-End Development and then shifted his main focus as Director of Accessibility. As a certified professional in web accessibility, Nick has been educating technical communities and empowering clients, including those in Fortune 500, by sharing his knowledge of the inner workings of the web, mixed with the insights of accessibility needs. He aims to help make accessibility a normality rather than an afterthought to developers, content authors, marketing, site owners, and beyond. And let me go ahead and introduce our second speaker, Norbert Rum. With more than 20 years of experience, Norbert has carved out a distinguished career in the digital world of accessibility, SEO/SEM. His journey is marked by leading successful accessibility solutions, including conducting WCAG compliance audits, and founding a thriving online community for the visually impaired over a decade ago, which now boasts over 23,000 members. This initiative highlights his dedication to making digital spaces inclusive, particularly for those with visual impairments. As experienced speaker at industry events like CSUN, Norbert's approach effectively blends technical proficiency with an in-depth understanding of user needs. This perspective is shared directly by end users, ensuring that digital platforms are not only compliant, but also engaging and user-friendly. In his work, Norbert adopts a client-focused view, striving to transform digital landscapes into an accessible, impactful, and approachable experiences. I'll ask you to take it away. Let's go.
All right, I'll start sharing screen. Give me 1 second. And should be coming through. So yes, thanks for the introductions. Yes, so I'm Nick Goodrum. People always say AmericanEagle.com. It's been kind of confused to plenty of times when we've interacted with people. So yes, no, not the airline. No, not the what is it? The clothing company, furniture store, whatever you're thinking. No, it's a full-service digital agency. We've been around for a bit. So yeah. Norbert and I want to kind of talk through, the survey that we initiated with online communities. And so with that, Norbert, you want to take it away?
Yeah, my name is Norbert Rum, and I will go to why another survey. Well, let's start the main reason behind it. The main reason is about over 10 years ago, I started a community on Reddit called Our Blind. And with Our Blind, which has over 26,000 subscribed readers, almost 35,000 unique active users a month, almost 1,000 active Discord users. And over the past few years, we noticed the members had differences from surveys that were globally available. and the voices did not match the stats. And from different online communities as well, we wanted to make sure that I wanted to make sure that I provided a megaphone to every single user to provide feedback.
Yeah, and what's interesting with our blind wasn't it originally it was originally for like actual blind sales, like for Windows, right?
Yeah, it started with window blinds, and I made sure to take that spam away and remove it and move it to the next chapter of its life, and made it into a nice, beautiful home.
Yep. And so, yeah, that's where a lot of this is around Reddit, and that was our starting point. And that's why I think even in the image is actually the Reddit
Snoo.
snoo, actually the Reddit blind snoo version, right?
So we had two snoos. One is the Reddit new Reddit logo, and the second snoo logo is a special one created by one of our users that represents our blind, and it was a great add-on to our community. So let's go on reasons for this survey. Many developers and site maintainers reference WebAIM and the survey results, and which we do as well. So we wanted to reach out to Jared Smith and talk to him and look at his results and see what we could add to it. The community online is a bit different than some other communities, so we wanted to get a comparison chart together. We reached out to other organizations and also other accessibility specialists on Reddit and outside of Reddit, including people that created the WCAG guidelines and professionals on that subject matter. And we brought in the questions to include also communities like the cerebral palsy community and the autism community and other communities that should be referenced in the survey, like such as this.
Yeah, and Jared, I mean, really, when we were interacting with him, I mean, he was saying, yeah, actually do another survey because if anything, it would reinforce what his findings are. Because it's not the first time he's ever heard that it's like, oh yeah, people didn't really agree with the findings. So it was like, okay, well, either A, you're going to find similar results, or B, you're going to find different results. Great. Now it gives us a sense of where the different types of users and it shows the more diversity involved with it. And so that's why we wanted to dive a bit deeper.
Yeah, we wanted to confirm our own understanding of user utilization of one or more devices. We wanted to confirm online communities and international users, or not just from the US, but outside the US. And we're trying to provide more insight on how to better develop the websites to determine the pain points and find solutions, hopefully, for the future.
Yeah.
So during
yeah, as developers ourselves, it was like, okay, let's see if we can extrapolate a bit because there's a lot of myths and a lot of misunderstandings of how people use the web.
So we started the survey, and during the launch of the survey, something happened. Accessibility became the front of a key issue. So last year when we ran the survey on our blind and a few other communities, Reddit made decisions that changed how users experience Reddit. So the API, there's a cost to the API. There was issues with the screen readers for third-party tools that were used to use Reddit, and this opened a floodgate. During this, Reddit users and moderators decided to group together and cause a blackout. And what a blackout means is we turn off the subreddit. And one group, our blind, that decided to do this as well. We couldn't, the moderators of our blind could not use the button to actually turn it off. The button was unlabeled. And I made a post about this and went to bed. Next morning, it went viral. And eventually ended up on The Verge and the New York Times and WBUR. During this blackout, subreddits such as Apple, which has millions of subscribers, and our videos, which has millions of subscribers, dedicated their shutdown to our blind. Post blackout, our blind intensified its push for accessibility on Reddit, engaging with even with the corporate staff of Reddit. There have been multiple rounds of fixing for accessibility on Reddit itself and the application itself. It helped achieve something new, which provide a voice to for accessibility for our blind and for its users.
No, it's a good reminder that, again, it's even the people that may feel like they don't have a voice, they actually can have a major impact on even large corporations. So yes, then what is on the survey? A wide variety of items. So covering aspects like demographics, right? The typical stuff. A lot of it was aligned with WebAIM, right? So a lot of the initial questions were trying to kind of pair and match with it, since Jared wanted to also get feedback to see if it would be drastically different. There's a lot more to this one, since it's not just for screen readers, it's for a variety of different devices. But yeah, so it's like location, your age ranges, the types of impairments people identify as having, employment levels, also getting into just internet proficiency, what they use for, like if they use a desktop or mobile devices, again, even if they're browser extensions. There's questions around, so there's like a wide variety of users. That's why, the image of visualizing kind of a diversity of individuals. And so it was also getting feedback. So for example, like multimedia, right? And how users actually prefer to digest content. Is it from, like transcripts, or do they prefer audio descriptions? Like, or do they want both, right? So getting kind of feedback on how people use the web. And so same thing, we'll talk about a bit later about, again, accessibility overlays and their experience and users' experience using them. And then of course, just even CAPTCHA, the thing that most people have to deal with every single day, the experiences around that, as well as just, their thoughts on the overarching improvements and also concerns in the accessibility space. So yes, with the pairing with WebAIM, there are a fair amount of questions about screen readers. So that's why, you've got desktop ones like NVDA and JAWS as shown in the image. You've got different proficiency levels. Also mobile device use was discussed, what kind of primary input devices they might be using, and even the consideration if they use a mouse or not when using a screen reader, and also just how they navigate long pages and the like. Then the key thing was this survey is done in a way that you actually say whether you use an assistive technology or not. So if you don't use that many assistive technology, the survey is actually a lot shorter. If you use multiple forms at the same time, there's a lot of more questions to fill out. And so, yes, there's many users that might say, I use a screen reader, and then also have questions because they said, yes, I also do use screen magnification. And so, we had questions around what assistive technology is being used for magnification, the amount of percentages they might increase with these different types. The same thing with font size enlargement, if they're using those techniques. And then if there's multiple layers, are they doing it at the same time? Are they doing different ones or just singles? And so again, just we've got magnification on the mind with also then style adjustments. So again, same thing, people got questions if they said, oh yeah, I actually do adjust my styles. So there were then questions around color adjustments, like the high contrast image here, high contrast mode preferences, whether websites, high contrast modes, if they provided them, they actually use them compared to just their own, browser or desktop settings. Whether there are people that actually prefer dark modes, and then if they're actually using any style extensions, so places like Stylish to actually make adjustments to websites for them. And again, there's all different types of inputs. So we wanted to also understand the ways people actually put information into their devices, right? So whether they actually use navigation with keyboard, screen readers, also talking about external keyboard usage for mobile devices, whether they're actually using that or not. Other input usages, right? So switch accesses, eye tracking, voice dictation usage. And that's why, voice dictation like Dragon Naturally Speaking or, OptiKey, those types of things where you could be using more than one as well. Now, there's also whether they're actually having difficulty navigating websites with these input devices. So then what are some of the survey results? Luckily, we don't have to cover every single thing today because there's too much to cover in a short period of time. But all the data is available online. So this year, we actually took all the data results and put them up there to make it publicly available since the community wanted their voices to be heard. So all key findings, results, and data is available at webaccessibilitysurvey.com. In there, there's over 100,000 cells of data that you can sort through, look through, and get feedback. There may be one or two comments that are not too happy about Reddit because, again, people were filling out the survey at the time of the blackout happening. The data page also allows for filtering, so you can actually search and sort. But if you prefer and you want to get like a downloaded Excel version, you can also do that as well on the site. But if you do have any difficulties, if you do have any questions, you can also reach out to a11y@americaneagle.com. So then what are some of the results, right? So demographics-wise, it's not too surprising, but a large number of users are from North America and Europe, mostly because either A, we can't completely be 100% sure, whether it's because of Reddit, or probably a major factor is it was, again, a survey only done in English. So probably countries like that probably have the most number of English-speaking users, and that's why they have a larger amount, with 60.1% from North America and 26.3% from Europe. Other countries, areas, including Asia and Oceania and Central America, also have some input, with Asia at 4.9%, Oceania at 5.5%, and South America at 1.6%. There's lower percentages in some of the other countries and areas like Middle East with only 0.7%, Africa with 0.5%, and Central America with 0.2%. So the statistical significance may be smaller, but you might still be able to extrapolate some anecdotal information about users from those areas. Now, we didn't force users to, like, they have to have a disability or an impairment in order to actually take this survey. And part of it is because not all users identify as having a disability. They may use assistive technology, but they actually don't identify as having a disability. But a large majority, almost 60%, so 58.9% of participants identified as having a disability. Then the types of impairments that was kind of broken down. Yes, the math doesn't math. Because people can select more than one option. So it adds up to more than 100%. So 40% of users stated that they had cognitive or learning impairments. 37% noted low vision, 24% noted blindness, 18% noted motor skills, 14% noted deafness or hard of hearing. And then others, like, they could also just put in whatever they wanted to add to this. So there were others that put in their medical conditions, additional features. So, things like hydrocephalus, and then color blindness and neurological disorders that they wanted to actually note. So there's a large variety in there, and there was writing areas for that. So if you did want to look through the data, you can find individuals who kind of explain their story. And the key thing here to kind of remember is that all users, there's all types of users that use assistive technology. So like I said, there was about 41% of users that said we don't, identify as having a disability. But of those 41% of users that's noted, they also noted using 9% of them using screen readers. So it may be that they may not identify, but they're actually using that assistive technology. 35.8% noted using screen magnification. And then 31.8% of those users also noted using color contrast adjustments. So it's, again, to try and get ourselves to get past the assumption that assistive technology is only for someone that is disabled. And it's like, no, it's for all types of users, because it can be beneficial for all types.
For everyone.
Yeah. Also, maybe surprising or not surprising to individuals on this webinar, that users are finding it difficult to navigate the web today, right? So from users that identified as having a disability, 48% of them combined fail CAPTCHA a few times a week to every day. So a lot of the questions did ask frequency. So how often did you feel like you failed a CAPTCHA? Was it all the time, or was it seldom? There was even people who said never. That would not be me. I have failed it multiple times. But I have a
There's
feeling.
perfect people out there.
Yeah, there's perfect people out there. Or again, it's just to show how questions can be interpreted differently. No data, no survey is 100% flawless. So they could have interpreted it as maybe they didn't pass a couple of times, but then actually were still able to get through in the end. And so they don't consider that a failure, versus others might say, oh, I didn't actually pass the initial round, so therefore I must have failed the CAPTCHA even though I eventually got in. 41% combined leave inaccessible sites a few times a week to every day. And so that's a reminder again, so people that are site owners that kind of go, okay, well, if someone has a problem, they might reach out or they might ask, for feedback or, let us know we're having problems. And it's like, no, they're just going to leave, right? Like they've got other things to do. So why stick around on a site that doesn't cater to them? So that might be especially impactful for sites that are trying to get members or like e-commerce. And so another aspect is 24% noted that web content has become less accessible over the past year. Again, there's percentages. A large majority just said it hasn't really changed because things are still not great. A lot of the technology has improved, but the web itself and websites are still not catering well enough to people with disabilities. So some other aspects, I think something that really is something to highlight compared to, let's say, like the WebAIM survey, is the top primary desktop screen reader results were quite high for NVDA. So 53.7% noted NVDA as their primary versus 24.9% for JAWS. And compare that to even this year's WebAIM survey, which still has them fairly close together, about 40% for JAWS and about 37% for NVDA. So they're fairly close together in the WebAIM survey versus this one. So is it, again, because of the demographics? Is it because of the online communities and the people involved with there? So it's hard to say from just the data, but it also shows us that there's a wide variety of users. So when you're looking at what you might want to test your sites with, at least those top two, there were additional ones. There's a lot of people who submitted even other screen readers for their primary, but those were the two largest ones. For the top mobile screen readers, 58.5% said voiceover versus 30.7% said talkback, which is really interesting if you look at the demographics, because actually Android use is much higher. But it then shows that maybe the larger demographic of users that use screen readers actually prefer iOS, probably because VoiceOver was one of the early on adopters of having a screen reader built into their device, and then others came a bit later. So that could be just historical aspect that people kind of stick with it. All right. So then let's get into some findings. So again, all the data is available online, and that's just a sampling of lots of questions involved with this.
Let's talk about one of my favorite subjects, overlays, and why they are a mixed bag. Some key findings in overlays. Out of 456 participants that said yes or were unsure of overlays, about 50% didn't know what overlay they interacted with. But out of the ones that did know, top three recognize accessibility, AudioEye, and EqualWeb. 54% gave an experience of 0 to 2 out of 5. 30% gave an experience of 0 out of 5, and 5% gave an experience of 5 out of 5. But there's some things that people need to understand. There is positives and good things with overlays. And on one of those, let's start with okay and great overlay experiences. Zoom options to increase font size in certain sections. Removing animation. Providing some keyboard accessibility for users that are keyboard-only users. But now let's talk about the poor experiences and feedback. Some things that happen, and this is from not only just from feedback from our blind, but also in the survey, is hijacked focus. The use of e-ink screens. So for example, users that are reading books online, the e-ink has a limited number of grayscales, and sometimes the overlay makes it extremely difficult to read. Once some other comments is, once I realized the screen readers both read at the same time as my screen reader. So turning that option off was difficult. Some overlays made the entire screen inaccessible, and they had to restart their computer due to the screen reader on the website with the overlay and the screen reader on their desktop blaring the communication with both devices.
Yeah, and that was a writing area. So there's actually some lengthier ones kind of just talking about it. Some
you
just they just completely block it. So there's some that said no problems because I block it. A wide variety of feedback from.
And now, and I would like to go in deeper with that. Is ad blockers do on some occasions block some of these overlay tools. So to put that in consideration, if you do choose an overlay, some ad blockers are actually blocking them from the users in order to prevent them from using them. Don't assume users, not every user is only using a keyboard with whatever technology they're using, such as screen readers. So one question on our blind that came up multiple times throughout the years was, why do people do not acknowledge that there's mouse screen reader users? So that was one of the lead questions in our survey that moved the momentum of getting this survey put together. Screen readers users do use mice and other input devices. 45.6% use input devices other than the keyboard as their primary input. 46.9% use a mouse while using a screen reader. Keyboard users are on mobile devices. 14.6% noted they use external keyboards in mobile. 67.5% noted that keyboard navigation is also not intuitive on mobile.
Yeah, and so that's why it's hard to say, right? Is it that there's a low percentage of users that use external keyboards because it's difficult or because they don't use them? And so that's where the limitations of sometimes a survey, you don't have enough to really say one way or the other. But it is interesting to note just the large number of users that noted having difficulties navigating on mobile devices.
And such things as ARIA labels, and you could provide a mouse with ARIA hidden as an example.
Yeah, so for like mice users, it's actually interesting. We again, because we test a lot ourselves, so we've seen a lot in the wild. And one of the things that we keep seeing in the past couple of years is an increase in users or developers on site owners that actually use ARIA hidden equals true. I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little technical here. ARIA hidden equals true, which means like hide it from screen readers on the text. And then so they'd be having like text inside of an anchor, for example, and they'd be like, okay, put the text inside, but hide the text and then add an ARIA label. So then the ARIA label overwrites what the name is. So it technically has a name, but for a mouse user, for example, in NVDA, when they hover over, it actually doesn't announce the ARIA labels. It only announces the text that you're hovering over. And since the text technically doesn't exist, it was thrown into a nebulous void by saying ARIA hidden equals true. They actually don't get any information on the link. And so that's a dangerous practice. And that's where it's kind of showing where you might want to start considering including mouse movement with screen readers in order to get a good sense for your testing purposes. Okay. So what are some, did you want to say anything else?
No, go ahead.
So yeah, some additional findings that we had. Again, we can only cover so much, but so one of the key findings from screen readers is that, so just interesting tidbits to kind of understand is that the 22.3% of screen reader users did not identify as having low vision or blindness. So it's a reminder to ourselves to not always assume that someone using a screen reader is only a blind individual. It could be someone that's using it because of dyslexia. They could be completely sighted and they just enjoy actually being able to have it announced to you. I've even, again, now being in the testing space and feeling comfortable with screen readers, I've even used screen readers to like get past limitations of particular websites that like, you know, they did poor responsive view. And so like there's items off screen. And so I can actually go to it and actually hit submit. I actually had to do that for, I think, a banking site once. And it was just like, all right, well, it's a good thing I have a screen reader available. And then 66% of screen reader users noted commonly navigating by headings on long pages. In comparison, landmarks was only about 15.2%. And so it's a reminder to ourselves, again, headings have been around for a long time versus HTML5 landmarks. That has only, and relations around that, that's only been in more recent years. So it could be why a large majority of users are still used to using headings than landmarks. Also, landmarks is still a bit Wild West in implementation, and older sites aren't going to have them. So I think that's why a lot of users use headings, because they can skim the content a bit faster than going by landmarks. It is noteworthy that the three major blockers for reaching a website are 74.6% of users needed unclear hierarchy or organization of content, kind of pointing back to those headings. If you don't have good heading structures, you don't have really good organization of content, how are they supposed to really navigate and understand what's on the page? 67.4% noted unlabeled form fields, and then 66.3% incompatible with assistive technology. So again, where the sites just kind of fail outright because of it. So some other key findings around other inputs. So to be honest, though, the survey did have lower percentages for switch access, eye tracking, so 5.4% for switch access, eye tracking pointers for 5.7%, and voice dictation at 9.7% usage. Now, is it because of the individual organizations we reached out to? Maybe they don't have as many users. So it may not still be a true indication on the number of users that use these technologies, but it may not be as significant in information, and still may be anecdotal depending on your tolerance levels for statistical analysis. But it's still good to kind of see through what they're dealing with. And so another input device that we considered was also Braille readers. So only 18% of screen readers responded, respondents noted using a Braille reader when navigating websites. What we, again, can't determine from the survey alone is whether is that low percentage because of literacy? Is there a literacy reduction? Or is it a tech preference, right? So maybe, you know, again, as we continue to plan into the future, is maybe we figure out more additional pointed questions to kind of help get clarity around these gaps. So now, do know everyone that was using these tools noted difficulties with links and buttons every day. Now, they're not every user, but 19.5% of keyboard users noted having difficulty every day. 31.4% of switch access users noted having difficulties every day. And 24.7% of pointer device users noted having difficulty every day. Now, is it because of the technology, or is it because, again, the web hasn't really been accounting for all these different user types in their testing practices and implementation techniques?
Yeah,
you want to go ahead? No, you first. Go ahead.
Okay. The key findings was magnification. That question in the beginning of the survey, do you have a disability, which sometimes was checked no. The common usage was magnification. A lot of users use magnification for browser magnification at 82.8% of the most three common. Browser font size magnification was a 60.9%, and operating system magnification at 59.5 magnification. Between most common browser magnification was at 46.1% was 100 to 150%. 16 to 20 px, most common font size enlargement was at 36.8%, and 150 to 199% under 200 was the most common OS magnification with 61.5%. Anecdotally, the lower magnification percentages are due to multiple techniques being used together. It's not just users depending on just browser magnification, but they're also using applications on the desktop or an app to also increase the size. So for example, if a user does only like the desktop version of a website instead of a mobile version of a website, they will choose to magnify their desktop and not the website and decrease that and use it together in order to provide them a desktop version of the website.
Yeah, it's that kind of, when there used to be separate mobile sites, right, that had its own pain points. But now that the web really has moved towards responsive, it's the question of, there's still a fair amount of sites that start to reduce content, reduce interactivity, reduce the amount of items, because the assumption of, quote, mobile users are on the go. But just because they're on a small device doesn't mean that they're necessarily on the go. And two, magnification users are going to end up in a very similar viewpoint, but they might actually still be on a desktop. And so that's why anecdotally, what we've come across in interacting with communities is that they kind of noted, oh, well, it's because I like still using the desktop version. So doing that combination allows them to still, without having to magnify a whole bunch, doing the combination of magnification allowed them to actually still get a desktop view versus a, quote, mobile view. So food for thought when you're actually developing your websites around that. All right, so all along we kind of stated, there are still some gaps, there's still some aspects to it. So again, we learned along the way as well.
So survey fatigue. Our blind and many other subreddits and other communities on Facebook do receive a large amount of surveys due to some surveys, users don't usually react to them. But on our survey, the average time it took to complete our survey was about 20 minutes and 38 seconds, with a completion rate of only 39%. Online communities, for our blind, when we made this post, received 14.5 thousand views of the post and only 4.5 thousand interactions, which is only 31%. Because survey fatigue, users on these communities sometimes do not want to interact with them.
Yeah, and again, because you noted sometimes in a month, how many surveys come in into like our blind, for example?
A couple dozen, and in the older version of our blind, sometimes our amazing moderators had to deal with 30, 40 a month, if not more. Again, it helps to provide new technology, also helps users to better understand certain type of technology, assistive technology, and so forth. But there's a lot of surveys that don't have real reason behind them, and they're just asked questions just being asked rather than some research done before posting a survey.
Yeah, and a note about the length and time. So what's interesting is, so for example, right, and it's all data, so we can only do so much with it. The average was also really skewed a little bit because some users would leave it open, and then now the question is, again, because we're not there, so I think we saw ones where it was like 24 hours or something like that, and it's like, was it because they had difficulty for that long, or did they just kind of leave it open? Hard to say. So like there were a fair amount that were still in 10 minutes or less, so it's not as, but it also depended on how many questions they had to fill out, since there was logic around, okay, yeah, if you used all that assistive technology, you ended up with a lot more questions than if you didn't really use much at all. And yeah, there was also platform limitations, right? So when we were looking through the different tools, Typeform kind of stood out to us for some of the logic that we needed and some of the setup. And we actually did involve moderators from the different communities, from like our blind and whatnot, to actually take a look as well. Again, we tested, but just also get other users' experience to say like, okay, what's the impact? Will people have difficulties with it? And so they noted limited impact for when they ran through it, but the tool is also constantly changing, just like all of the ones online. And so there did end up being some complications, but we were able to kind of work around those limitations, like radio buttons in particular questions. If they had too many options, some Android users with TalkBack couldn't fill it out correctly. And so then we made adjustments to make it into, from initial feedback, it was, okay, we'll make this a multiple choice rather than a radio box at the time. And then there were, question limitations, right? So, there was even feedback to say, like, sometimes when they say yes, that they did want to answer questions about the system technology. Once they started getting into it, they're like, actually, it's not exactly what I was thinking it would be. They could have backed out, but maybe it wasn't clear enough that they can also back out and make those changes. So there were instances where sometimes they wanted a not applicable or a none, but it wasn't available. So in future iterations, we'll probably include some options for that, or make it clearer on what they're going to be going into for questions or backing out of it. And some of them just end up with lots of questions, right? So to be agnostic of software, we had to have 20, 30 options, and listing them all can be quite large as well. So trying to find that balance, we even omitted one, a couple of items, and maybe we should have kept it in because that might influence what the user feedback is, right? Because if they don't immediately see it, they may not actually then list it as an option. And then there was also typeform short answers made questions more difficult due to single line inputs, but long answers also had their own limitations. So it was kind of, some users noted, again, it's a small input versus a longer text area, but it was, again, compromising due to the limitations within the typeform setup. But yeah, so what's next? We're going to continue to add findings, publications. If you use any of this data and you publish anything, reach out. You can contact us online, reach out at a11y@americaneagle.com. We'd be happy to post. We have a publications area. We can put your information in there to help spread the word. Because again, this is all just to help all end users better understand, and site owners understand how to make the web a better place. So again, we're also connecting with different survey makers, right? So continue to work with WebAIM and other ones out there to, again, when does it make sense to still have a separate one? And then we're comparing additional tools, looking at places like accessible surveys, and we're working with other organizations and online communities to see if we can also broaden the participation. So yeah, we're planning for the next release of surveys in early 2025. All right, it looks like we've got some questions so far. So
I can go ahead and moderate those questions for you. This is just.
Thank
you. Thank you. So I'll read the first one, the earliest one that came in, and I want to thank you for this amazing presentation on your survey. I have questions as well if we have time.
Yeah.
So our first one from the audience. What do you say to people who see this clear data and disregard it for the sake of their aesthetic anyway? And do you have a diplomatic go-to response for this?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, so there's some, like, I feel like with e-commerce and some site owners that are in for a financial gain in some way, the data itself, a lot of them are data driven, and we've not generally seen them shy away from that, because actually that information, if anything, helps guide them, because conversions equal against financial gain, right? When you talk about how do you get people to be interested in accessibility, and you would hope it would be just the ideal, like you would want to do this, you care about others, right? But then businesses, at the end of the day, they also have to, keep the lights on. And so a lot of times when I'm discussing things with clients and, again, out there, I kind of just treat it as find selfish reasons. And so showing that data usually gives them selfish reasons to move forward with it. Designers now, if they're like, but I like this look and feel, but you can kind of see it in the web as well, right? If you look at like Web 2.0, and it was Wild West, and everyone made their own interfaces that were highly decorative and all over the place. And then you see this shift over time to kind of more simplified views, much more about getting those conversions. And so as we focus on that, I feel like a lot of designers that are designing for the web, that are part of companies and whatnot, they probably don't have as much weight nowadays in that aesthetic argument, because if you've got the data to show, you're going to have a large number of users leaving your site. You're going to actually decrease your conversions, can often really kind of help put them in their place.
Yeah, and keep in mind, 40% said they don't have a disability. So you're gonna make
Yeah.
that judgment call.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, again, we're the website for superhumans that have no flaws whatsoever. And it's like, well, are you sure? And are you sure that they might still not want to be able to use the assistive technology when they're accessing your site? So that's, I guess it's not really, a diplomatic answer on how to push back in other data, but along the lines of, we haven't really seen that much pushback when we start talking with clients about it. But yeah, for hopefully the main thing you would learn from is find selfish reasons. And once you find the selfish reasons, usually people will get on board.
I like that point that you said, to make it data-driven numbers and find the reason, even though the boss is going to kick back for something. I'm going to move on to our next audience question. It says, given the general negative view of overlays, outside of adding an overlay, are there any positive aspects that were noted that you would think should be implemented in sites?
And one that stood out for neurodiversity reasons. Overlay tools like putting a line, a ruler, providing a ruler for long content pages, for such as blogs, is extremely helpful. Highlighting, extremely helpful. These tools are very helpful in making a site more usable. Another one that helped a lot was larger fonts. One for stop motion, for example. Again, there's tools within overlays that are very helpful and could provide essential elements to any site if you just add them into a site as an option and provide that feedback.
And so if you look at a lot of the positive versus negatives, a lot of the positive responses were just focusing on the personalization options that overlays provide. Now, again, a lot of them, if someone needs this every single day, they probably are already going to use an extension or software to already provide this and may not really rely on the overlay alone. So as developers, do you feel like you have to build the whole entire suite for them? Maybe not, but there could be users that might appreciate that personalization. So the positive side that a lot of people focus on is more about that personalization aspect of it, and user settings. And a lot of the negativity was that we saw from the data was really a lot around the automation. So if there was a lot of remediation that was coming from them, that's where things were starting to go wrong, versus oh, I can change my font styles. Now, that's not to say everyone, but if you were kind of looking at it from a high level, that's kind of where the pain points were starting to come in from, the negative side versus the positive side. So there's even, there are overlays that are just simply that, like, oh, maybe you want to change a couple of font sizes. Maybe you want to have a dark mode. And I would look at it that way. It's like, rather than doing something generalized, though, as site owners and site developers, you might want to make your own, branded versions of that. And so if anything, it's an opportunity for you to kind of build your own system, rather than relying on a font size adjuster that maybe isn't really accounting for your site and your styles.
Thank you. I've got another one from the audience. If you had to choose a single portion of your data results to highlight as the most significant and impactful, what would that be?
That's a tough one.
For me, it's as I pointed out in an earlier slide, that a lot of users depend on multiple things on your site that are related to Ally. And to keep that in mind when you're building any website or any system like this, like a website, that there's all types of users that you wouldn't know that would be using your site in a certain way. And just to keep that in mind. And that blew me away because a lot of users chose they're not disabled, but use tools that were made for the disabled users. So, and magnification is one, color contrast is one, closed caption is one, multiple things that layer on top of layer of tools that helped accessibility in the last 10 years, 15 years are being used by everyone, not just a certain type of user that one would think. So that's a great thing that I pulled out of this survey that it helped.
Yeah, and I would just say again, as developers, it just again helping break those myths. So a couple of those things where it's again the types of users, what they're interacting with, being able to reinforce our own kind of anecdotal aspects. So for us personally, it was things like, yeah, they do use a mouse, right?
See, told you.
Yeah, it's like
We're at time.
yeah, we're out of time. So I know we're at time, but thank you for all the questions and thank you for the time today.
Thank you.
So as our captioners take a break, we will be back at the top of the hour. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. Oh yes, I have a script. We appreciate it if you go ahead and go to the 2024 WP Accessibility Day.day/feedback to provide anonymous feedback for our speakers on our presentation. You can enter to win a t-shirt while you're there. Stay tuned for our next session at the top of the hour, developing accessible Gutenberg blocks. And don't forget to visit our sponsors pages to grab virtual swag and enter for a chance to win great prizes. See you here after the break.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you to WordPress Accessibility Day 2024 sponsors. Platinum sponsor 20i. Easily build, deploy, and manage all your projects with 20i managed WordPress hosting. One UI for all your servers, apps, sites, databases, security, DNS, and email. Perfect for agencies, e-commerce, developers, multi-site hosting, and high-traffic sites. Platinum sponsor Equalize Digital. Since all they do is accessibility, every post on their blog is an accessibility resource. You can find webinar recordings, articles, and additional resources at equalizedigital.com/resources. Platinum sponsor, WP Engine. WP Engine provides the most relied upon and trusted WordPress products for businesses, brands, and agencies of all sizes. Thanks to our gold sponsors, GoDaddy, Grackle Docs, Gravity Forms, Green Geeks, TPGI, and Yoast. And thank you to our silver sponsors, CodeGeek, Drake Cooper, Elementor, Overnight Website, Pressable, Second Melody, and Accessibility Collective.